The date is November 13th, 1974. And the setting is a lonely, dark stretch of State Highway 74 just south of Crescent, Oklahoma.
It's a Wednesday evening. The time is approximately 7:00 p.m.
And there's a white 1973 Honda Civic. It's moving south, heading toward Oklahoma City. Behind the wheel is a 28-year-old woman named Karen Silkwood.
She's a laboratory technician, also a mother, and a union activist.
And depending on which version of history you subscribe to, she is either, an exhausted employee who is prone to falling asleep at the wheel, or she is, at that very specific moment, the most dangerous woman in America to the nuclear industry.
The context here is just so critical. She is not just driving home after a shift.
No.
She's driving to a meeting that she believes will fundamentally alter the future of the facility where she works. And she's reportedly carrying a manila folder on the seat beside her.
A folder. And inside that folder, according to witnesses who saw her just minutes earlier, is a collection of documents, proprietary company papers.
And her plan is to hand them over to a reporter from the New York Times, a man named David Burnham, and also a union official, Steve Wodka.
The stakes here are, they're incredibly high. We're not talking about some minor labor dispute. She spent months gathering what she claims is proof. Proof that her employer, the Kerr-McGee Corporation, is falsifying safety records and endangering the lives of its workers.
She's terrified. People who spoke to her said she'd been contaminated with plutonium herself just days before this.
Right. But she is determined to make this handoff. She believes this folder contains the smoking gun.
But she never makes it to Oklahoma City.
Never. Less than 30 minutes after leaving a union meeting at the Hub Cafe in Crescent, her vehicle leaves the road. It travels along the grass shoulder, and then it impacts the wing wall of a concrete culvert.
The collision is violent. The steering wheel pins her to the roof of the car. She is pronounced dead at the scene.
And when the authorities and the union officials arrive at the wreck, well, the mystery begins immediately. That manila folder, the one witnesses saw her holding, the one with the alleged proof of falsification, it's gone.
It is not in the car. It is not at the scene. It has simply vanished.
This incident sparked one of the most complex, controversial, and just significant investigations in American labor history. It involves questions of nuclear safety, corporate negligence,
and forensic anomalies in a car crash, plus a legal battle that went all the way to the United States Supreme Court.
So that is our mission for this discussion. We are going to analyze the life of Karen Silkwood, the technical nature of her work, the whistleblowing campaign she led, the forensic details surrounding her death, and the lasting legal legacy she left behind.
And we are drawing from a range of sources: biographical records, court case summaries, specifically from Silkwood v. Kerr-McGee, and accident investigation reports, as well as historical accounts of the nuclear industry.
We really need to understand the mechanics of what happened here, not just, the headlines.
My focus will be on the technical analysis. So the plutonium production process, the specific legal arguments about labor disputes and liability, and the forensic evidence that was found, and maybe more importantly, not found, at the crash site.
And I'll be leading the narrative, detailing the biographical events and the timeline of the crash. I want to start by framing who she was. Because before she was a martyr or, a headline, she was a person with a very specific background that, well, it made her uniquely suited for this role she took on.
So who is Karen Silkwood before the controversy?
Exactly. Let's start there.
Biographical records indicate she was born Karen Gay Silkwood on February 19, 1946, in Longview, Texas. She was raised in Nederland, Texas.
And it's worth noting her academic background right from the start. In high school, she was a member of the National Honor Society, a straight-A student.
And specifically, she excelled in chemistry.
Right, and that detail becomes very, very relevant later on. She wasn't just someone pressing buttons on a machine. She understood the fundamental science of what she was working with.
Correct. Her aptitude for chemistry was significant. In the fall of 1964, she enrolled at Lamar State College of Technology in Beaumont, Texas, and she was there on a scholarship.
A scholarship from the Business and Professional Women's Club, which, it suggests she was viewed as a student with considerable potential in the sciences.
And at that time, you have to remember, women in STEM fields were not nearly as common, so this really highlights her capability.
But her academic path, it took a detour. In 1965, she dropped out of college. She eloped with a man named William Meadows, an oil pipeline worker.
And this began a period of her life that was, by all accounts, quite tumultuous. They had 3 children together, but the marriage was unstable.
Very. Financial records from that period show the couple actually filed for bankruptcy.
The primary cause appears to have been Meadows' spending habits. There were also personal issues, specifically regarding infidelity on his part.
Right. So in 1972, the marriage dissolves. Silkwood leaves Meadows. And this is a point that is often brought up by her critics. She left her 3 children behind with their father when she moved to Oklahoma City.
It was a very unconventional move for a mother in 1972.
It was, and initially she worked as a hospital clerk, but she needed a better income. Which brings us to August 1972.
This is when she was hired by the Kerr-McGee Corporation at their Cimarron fuel fabrication site. This facility was located near Crescent, Oklahoma, situated near the Cimarron River.
I want to pause here and really dig into what Cimarron fuel fabrication site actually means. It sounds so industrial and dry, but what were they actually doing there? Her job title was metallurgy laboratory technician. What does a person with that title do every day?
The Cimarron facility was responsible for manufacturing plutonium pellets. These pellets were destined for use in fuel rods for nuclear reactors, specifically what are called breeder reactors.
Okay, so plutonium. Let's talk about the material itself.
To understand the risk, you have to understand the material. Plutonium-239 is a heavy metal. It's man-made, produced in reactors, and it's strictly regulated because it is highly carcinogenic.
And when we say carcinogenic, we aren't talking about a minor risk like, standing in the sun too long. We're talking about something much, much more aggressive.
Precisely. Plutonium emits alpha particles. An alpha particle is a type of ionizing radiation. Now, externally, alpha particles are not very penetrating.
So they can be stopped easily.
They can be stopped by a sheet of paper or even just the dead layer of skin on your hand. So holding a sealed piece of plutonium isn't necessarily the immediate danger. The danger is internal.
So if you breathe it in, that's the problem.
Yes. If plutonium particles are inhaled or ingested, they enter the body.
Yeah.
Because they are heavy metals, they tend to lodge in the lungs, the liver, or specifically in the bone tissue.
And once it's there, it stays there.
For a very long time. And once inside, those alpha particles are being emitted directly into living cells. They destroy the DNA structure of the surrounding tissue. This can lead to fibrosis or cancer developing years or even decades later. It is a biological time bomb.
And the facility where Silkwood worked was dealing with this material in powder and pellet form every single day.
The work was done in what are called glove boxes. These are sealed stainless steel boxes with glass viewing windows, and there are thick rubber gloves built into the sides of the box.
So the worker stands outside the box.
Correct. You stand outside, put your arms into the gloves, and manipulate the plutonium inside the box. The air pressure inside the box is kept lower than the room air, so if there's a leak, air flows in, not out, which is a key safety feature.
That sounds incredibly tedious. Standing there for 8 hours, arms stuck in heavy rubber gloves, manipulating these tiny pellets behind glass.
It's physically demanding, and it requires immense concentration. A slip, a tear in a glove, or a seal failure means potential contamination.
So she joins the company in 72. She also joins the union, the Oil, Chemical and Atomic Workers Union, or OCAW. And almost immediately, she's involved in labor disputes. This was not a happy workplace.
No. In November 1972, shortly after she was hired, she participated in a strike. The union was protesting poor working conditions and wages.
Then how did that go?
Kerr-McGee effectively broke the strike. They hired replacement workers, often referred to as scabs, from the surrounding area to cross the picket lines.
That sets up a very tense dynamic right away. You have the union workers who returned after the failed strike, and you have the management who knows they won, and then you have the scabs working right alongside the union members.
It was a recipe for conflict. And by 1974, the company wasn't just tolerating the union, they were actively trying to get rid of it. There was a move to decertify the union.
And what does that mean exactly, to decertify?
Decertification effectively means removing the union as the bargaining agent for the employees. Management was encouraging workers to sign a petition to force an election on this very issue.
So in response to this threat, the union needed to strengthen its position. And in August of 1974, Karen Silkwood was elected to the 3-person bargaining committee for the local union chapter.
And she was the first woman to ever hold that position at Kerr-McGee.
That tells you something about her personality right there. She wasn't afraid to step up in a very male-dominated environment. And her specific assignment within that committee was health and safety.
This is where her background in chemistry and her role as a lab technician really merged with her union activities. She wasn't just looking at paychecks. She began investigating and documenting specific violations at the Cimarron plant.
And what she found was serious.
Very serious. She documented instances where workers were exposed to contamination. She found that respiratory equipment was often faulty.
She also raised issues about the facilities themselves, didn't she? The physical infrastructure.
Yes. She noted that samples were being stored improperly, and she argued that the shower facilities were insufficient. If you are working with plutonium, the ability to thoroughly shower and decontaminate before leaving the work area is the primary line of defense against taking that contamination home.
If the showers are lacking, the risk just goes way up.
It increases exponentially. Furthermore, she found evidence of missing plutonium nuclear material that could not be accounted for in the inventory.
Missing plutonium is a terrifying phrase. You can't just lose this stuff. It implies either, gross incompetence in tracking or
theft. In a regulated environment, strict accounting is the law. The Atomic Energy Commission, the AEC, set standards for how much material could be unaccounted for due to normal processing losses, stuck in pipes, filters, things like that. But Silkwood believed the missing amounts far exceeded those explanations.
This brings us to September 1974. The union is fighting for its life against this decertification vote. Silkwood and the other committee members, they fly to Washington, D.C. to meet with the national union leadership.
And this meeting changes everything.
It seems to be the turning point.
The meeting took place on September 26, 1974. They met with Tony Mazzocchi, who was the legislative director for the OCAW, and the committee members, they laid out their grievances about the working condition.
And during this meeting, a significant realization occurred.
Yes. Mazzocchi realized that the workers at Cimarron, including Silkwood, were not fully informed about the biological hazards of the materials they handled every day.
Wait, you mean they didn't know plutonium caused cancer? How is that even possible?
Not to the full extent. Mazzocchi later wrote that when he explained the direct connection between plutonium exposure and cancer, it seemed to take Silkwood by surprise. She had been working in that lab for 2 years. She knew it was dangerous. She knew it was radioactive.
But not the specifics.
The specific long-term biological mechanism that it is a potent carcinogen that can cause cancer 20 years down the line that was apparently not clearly communicated to the staff.
That must have been a terrifying moment. To realize you've been handling this stuff for 2 years without understanding the true cost. It changes the calculation from, I might get burned, to I might die in 20 years.
It shifted her motivation completely. It wasn't just about wages or hours anymore, it was about survival. But during this meeting, Silkwood revealed something else to Mazzocchi. She pulled him aside.
This is the smoking gun allegation, the thing that could take the company down.
Precisely. She told Mazzocchi that laboratory technicians were using felt-tip pens to touch up x-rays of the fuel rods.
Retouching x-rays with a marker. Why would they do that?
To hide defects. The fuel rods are welded shut, and those welds must be perfect to contain the radioactive material inside. An X-ray would show if there were tiny cracks or air gaps in the weld. These appear as white lines or spots on the negative.
So she was saying they were just coloring them in.
Silkwood alleged that technicians were using ink to cover those white lines on the X-ray negatives, effectively making the cracks disappear from the record.
If that is true, that is not just negligence. That is actively falsifying safety data on nuclear fuel.
It constitutes gross negligence and fraud. If a fuel rod fails inside a reactor because of a faulty weld, the consequences could be catastrophic. It could lead to a release of radioactive material or even a failure of the reactor core.
And Mazzocchi, he realized the gravity of this immediately.
He did. He told Silkwood that if she could prove that, if she could get hard evidence of the falsification, they could use it to stop the decertification and force the company to improve conditions.
So the strategy changes. Now it's an investigation. They decide to go on the offensive.
They did. On September 27, the day after the meeting, Silkwood testified to the Atomic Energy Commission. She put her complaints on the official record.
She testified about her own previous contamination incidents and alleged that safety standards were being relaxed to speed up production.
They also launched an education campaign. They didn't just keep this cancer information to themselves. The union brought in atomic scientists from the University of Minnesota to lecture the Cimarron workers on plutonium toxicity.
And a lot of people showed up.
About 100 coworkers attended. This surge in awareness and activity worked. In October, the decertification vote was held, and the union won, 80 to 61. The union survived.
But the atmosphere at the plant after that vote, I mean, it must have been incredibly hostile. You have a management team that just lost a major battle, and you have Silkwood, who is now a known whistleblower, testifying to the federal government. She's walking around with a target on her back.
Reports from that time describe an atmosphere of absolute paranoia. Workers reported strange clicks on their telephones, suggesting wiretaps. There were claims of people being tailed in their cars or even forced off the road.
The tension between the company loyalists and the union activists was extreme. It was a siege mentality.
It was. And in the middle of this hostile environment, we enter the first week of November 1974. This is the contamination incident. It plays out over 3 days, November 5th through the 7th.
Walk us through this, because this is where the physical evidence gets very, very strange and frightening.
On November 5, Silkwood was performing a routine self-check at the plant. She had been working in the glove box grinding pellets. When she checked herself on the monitor, it showed she had almost 400 times the legal limit of plutonium contamination on her person.
400 times the limit. That alarm must have been just screaming.
It would have been incredibly alarming. She was decontaminated at the plant. This involves scrubbing the skin with chemical mixtures, sometimes until the skin is raw, to remove the particles. She was then sent home with a testing kit to collect biological samples, urine, and feces for further analysis.
And this is where a key forensic detail emerges.
Yes. Plutonium was found on the inner portions of the gloves she had been using in the glove box.
The inside of the gloves. That shouldn't be possible if the system works the way it's supposed to.
Correct. Subsequent tests by Kerr-McGee personnel showed that the gloves had no leaks or perforations. If the gloves are sealed and the contamination is on the inside, it suggests the contamination did not come from the glove box she was working in.
So it came from the room side.
It implies the contamination was introduced from the room side, meaning she put her hand into the glove while her hand was already contaminated, or someone placed contamination in the glove.
Okay, so the next day, November 6th, she comes back to work.
She arrived at work and again tested positive for plutonium. This is despite the fact that she had only performed paperwork duties that morning. She hadn't been near the glove boxes. She was given a much more intensive decontamination.
And then November 7th. This is the escalation.
On November 7, she was found to be severely contaminated immediately upon entering the plant. She hadn't even started her shift. It was so severe that she was reportedly expelling contaminated air from her lungs.
She's breathing it out. That means it was deep inside her system.
Yes. A health physics team accompanied her back to her home to conduct an inspection, and they found traces of plutonium on several surfaces. The highest concentrations were in the bathroom and notably in the refrigerator. Contamination was found on food items, specifically bologna and cheese.
I have to stop on that detail. Plutonium on her bologna. That is such a visceral violation. It's one thing to have radiation in a lab, but in your fridge, on your lunch meat, that suggests that contamination was rampant in her private space.
It resulted in the house being stripped. Personal property had to be destroyed for decontamination. Silkwood, along with her boyfriend Drew Stevens and her roommate Sherry Ellis, were sent to Los Alamos National Laboratory for in-depth testing to determine their body burden, the amount of plutonium they had internally.
Now, Kerr-McGee had a theory about all this. They claimed she did it to herself. They said she was trying to spike her urine samples to make the company look bad.
Management alleged that Silkwood had intentionally contaminated herself to smear the company's reputation. They pointed to the high levels in her home urine samples compared to the lower levels in samples taken at the plant, suggesting she might have spiked the home samples.
But there is a piece of evidence that contradicts the idea that she did it to herself. It has to do with where, specifically, the plutonium came from.
This is a critical point. According to Richard Radke's investigation, the specific isotope fingerprint of the plutonium found in Silkwood's home was traced back to a very specific production batch, pellet lot 29.
And why does lot 29 matter so much?
Because Karen Silkwood did not work with lot 29. Furthermore, starting in August of that year, samples from pellet lot 29 were stored in a secure vault. Silkwood did not have the access codes or the clearance to enter that vault.
So for her to contaminate herself with lot 29, she would have had to break into a secure vault, steal a specific batch of plutonium she didn't normally handle, and then poison herself with it. That seems like a stretch.
It is highly improbable. The presence of lot 29 strongly suggests that a third party, someone with access to the vault, removed that material. The implication is that it was subsequently used to contaminate her, perhaps by placing it on her food or somewhere in her apartment.
This supports the theory that she was being targeted to discredit her or, to frighten her.
Exactly. So by November 13th, she is terrified. She thinks she is dying. She told people she believed the plutonium in her lungs was going to kill her, but she also believed she had the proof she needed to blow the lid off the whole thing. She was ready to burn the house down, metaphorically speaking.
Which brings us back to the night of November 13th.
She attends a union meeting at the Hug Cafe in Crescent. It starts at 5:30 p.m. There are 10 other union members there.
And what do the witnesses say about her demeanor? Was she acting erratic?
A sworn affidavit from Wanda Jane Young, who was at the meeting, states that Silkwood was emotional. She was crying quietly during a break. She expressed her fear of dying from cancer due to the contamination event of the previous week. She was clearly under immense psychological strain.
But she also had the documents. This is the key.
Yes. Young stated that Silkwood had a binder and a packet of documents. Young recalled Silkwood clutching the folder and saying she was glad about one thing, that she had all the proof concerning falsification of records.
So she said it out loud.
She explicitly stated she was on her way to meet Steve Wodka and the New York Times reporter to hand over this material.
At 7:10 p.m., she leaves the cafe. She gets into her white Honda Civic. She drives south on Highway 74. She is alone.
The distance to the crash site is 7.3 miles. Less than 30 minutes later, her body is found.
Let's look at the official explanation of the crash first. The police and the coroner arrive on the scene. What is their conclusion?
The Oklahoma Highway Patrol report ruled it an accident. They concluded that she fell asleep at the wheel. The car ran off the road to the left, traveled along the grass, and struck the culvert.
And they found drugs in the car, which, that bolstered that theory.
The trooper found 1 or 2 tablets of methacolone, commonly known as Quaaludes, and what appeared to be marijuana. The coroner's toxicology report found 0.35 milligrams of methacolone in her blood.
Is that a lot? Enough to make you pass out while driving?
A therapeutic dose is generally considered 0.25 milligrams. A toxic dose is around 0.50 milligrams. So 0.35 is in the range that could cause drowsiness or impaired reaction time. This supported the police theory of her falling asleep.
But the union didn't buy it. They hired their own investigator, a crash reconstruction expert named A.O. Pipkin Jr., and he found evidence that completely contradicted the sleep-at-the-wheel theory.
Pipkin's analysis highlighted several major inconsistencies with a sleep-related accident. First, he noted the steering wheel. It was bent backward on the sides.
Bent backward? What does that tell us?
It indicates that the driver was bracing for impact, holding on tight with locked arms. When a driver is asleep, they're typically limp at the moment of impact, and the body moves forward into the wheel. But if the wheel is bent back, it suggests she was stiff-armed, pushing against it.
It suggests she was wide awake.
Wide awake and trying to maintain control.
And what about the car leaving the road to the left?
That was Pipkin's second point. Roads are built with a crown. They're slightly higher in the middle to allow water to drain off. If a driver falls asleep, the natural drift of the car, due to the crown and gravity, is to the right. Silkwood's car went off to the left across the opposing lane of traffic.
So she would have had to actively steer against the natural drift of the road to go left. That requires input.
Exactly. Furthermore, Pipkin analyzed the tire tracks in the grass. He stated that the tracks showed the car was not drifting but was out of control before it even left the pavement.
And then there is the rear bumper. This is perhaps the most famous piece of evidence in the whole case.
Pipkin found fresh dents on the left rear bumper of the Honda. Friends and family confirmed these dents were not there previously. Since the crash was a head-on collision with a concrete wall, there was no explanation for fresh damage on the rear of the car.
And it wasn't just dents, there was paint transfer, correct?
Microscopic analysis revealed paint chips in those rear dents that did not match Silkwood's car, nor did they match the concrete wall. This evidence strongly supported the theory that she was rammed from behind by another vehicle.
The implication being that someone hit her bumper, causing her to lose control and shoot off the road to the left.
This aligns with the out-of-control skid marks. The theory put forward by the union officials, Mazaki and Wodka, was not necessarily that it was premeditated murder in the sense of a planned hit, but perhaps intimidation gone wrong.
Right, they thought maybe someone was just trying to scare her, trying to run her off the road to grab the documents, but she lost control and hit the culvert. It fits the pattern of harassment, the tailing, the strange phone calls.
Or that she was being chased. If she was looking in her rearview mirror at a car tailing her, or looking to her right at a car alongside her, she might not have seen the culvert approaching until it was too late.
But regardless of how it happened, whether she was rammed or chased, the documents were gone. The police didn't find them. The union didn't find them.
And this absence is significant. Witnesses placed the documents in her hands at 7:10 p.m. By 7:04 p.m., they had vanished. If it was a simple accident, those papers should have been scattered inside the car. Their absence suggests they were removed from the scene before the official investigation began.
The death of Karen Silkwood triggered a massive reaction. It wasn't just a local story anymore, it was national news. The New York Times ran the story anyway, even without the documents. And it triggered a federal investigation into the plant itself.
It did. And that investigation validated many of her concerns. The scrutiny led to a check of the plant's inventory. The investigation determined that 20 to 30 kilograms, that's roughly 44 to 66 pounds of plutonium, was unaccounted for at the plant.
44 to 66 pounds of missing plutonium. That is a staggering amount. We are not talking about microscopic dust here.
To put that in perspective, that quantity is sufficient to manufacture 3 to 4 nuclear weapons.
Where did it go? Did they ever find it?
It was never officially located. There were theories ranging from simple record-keeping errors to sophisticated smuggling rings. Richard Rashke, in his book on the subject, suggested that the security was so lax that workers could have literally walked out with pellets in their pockets.
But the immediate result of all this scrutiny was the end of the facility.
Correct. Kerr-McGee closed the nuclear fuel plants in 1975, just 1 year after the incident. They couldn't survive the spotlight. The decommissioning process was long, finally completed by 1994, but the facility effectively died with Karen Silkwood.
But the legal battle was just starting. This is where the story shifts from a mystery to a landmark legal precedent. In 1976, Karen's father, Bill Silkwood, filed a civil suit against Kerr-McGee.
The case was Silkwood v. Kerr-McGee. It was filed for gross negligence regarding the plutonium contamination she suffered prior to her death. They sought damages for her property loss, personal injury, and punitive damages to punish the corporation.
The period leading up to the trial sounds like something out of a spy novel. We have reports of harassment against the legal team.
It was incredibly contentious. Investigators reported being paled. There's a documented instance where a witness fled to West Germany to avoid a subpoena. A police officer who was about to be deposed reportedly died of a sudden heart attack before he could testify, with no autopsy performed.
The trial finally happened in 1979. The estate's lawyers, led by Jerry Spence, argued that the plutonium found in her body proved the negligence. They didn't have to prove how she died in the car. They focused entirely on the contamination.
And the defense, led by Kerr-McGee's team, argued that Silkwood was a troublemaker who poisoned herself. They brought in experts from Los Alamos to argue that the contamination levels were within legal standards. However, the jury did not agree with the company.
No, they did not. They came back with a massive verdict.
They awarded $505,000 in actual damages and a stunning $10 million in punitive damages. At the time, that was an enormous sum for this type of case. It was sending a message.
But then the appeal started. And this is where it gets into that Supreme Court territory. This is the part that law students study today.
The Federal Appeals Court reduced the judgment significantly. They threw out the punitive damages completely. Their reasoning was based on a legal concept called federal preemption.
Okay, what does that mean?
They argued that the nuclear industry is federally regulated by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, or NRC. Therefore, they argued, federal regulations preempted state law. Essentially, they said a state jury couldn't punish a company for violating federal standards. Only the federal government could do that.
And that sounds like a get-out-of-jail-free card for corporations.
Yeah.
We follow the federal rules, so state courts can't touch us.
That was the argument. It was a battle between federal authority and state rights regarding safety. But the Supreme Court disagreed. In 1984, in a landmark ruling, the Supreme Court reinstated the verdict. They ruled that while the NRC sets the safety standards, that does not prevent state law from providing remedies for those injured by negligence.
What does that mean for the average person? Why is that so important?
It established that federal compliance is not a shield against state tort liability. Even if a company says, we followed the federal checklist, a jury can still say, you were negligent and you have to pay. It's a critical precedent in American law that protects the right of individuals to sue corporations, even highly regulated ones.
That is a huge legacy. Following that Supreme Court ruling, Kerr-McGee eventually settled out of court in 1986 for $1.38 million. They admitted no liability, but they paid.
And Karen Silkwood's story didn't just stay in the courtrooms, it became part of our culture. Most people know her name because of the movie.
Silkwood, released in 1983, Directed by Mike Nichols, starring Meryl Streep as Karen, it was nominated for multiple Academy Awards. It brought the story to a massive audience.
And Cher played the roommate, didn't she?
Yes, Cher portrayed the character based on Sherry Ellis. It's worth noting that while the film is a dramatization, it adheres very closely to many of the factual events we've discussed, particularly the timeline of the contamination in the crash.
There was also The China Syndrome, which came out in 1979. That film was released shortly after the trial. It features a plotline that is just strikingly similar. A whistleblower with evidence of falsified records at a nuclear plant is rammed off the road.
It doesn't cite Silkwood by name, but the parallel is.
Yeah.
It's undeniable.
Hmm.
Her name has become a synonym for whistleblowing. When people talk about modern figures exposing corporate or government secrets, Silkwood is often cited as the archetype, the lonely individual against the massive machine.
And like many of those stories, it remains unresolved in key areas. We know the outcome. She died, the plant closed, the family won the lawsuit. But the central mystery remains.
The documents.
The documents. And the rear bumper. Those physical pieces of evidence point to a truth that was never officially confirmed.
So let's recap what we know for sure. We know Karen Silkwood was a brilliant young woman with a talent for chemistry. We know she found evidence of negligence at a plutonium plant. We know she was contaminated with plutonium from a batch she couldn't access. And we know she died in a violent crash while en route to deliver proof of falsification to the press.
We also know that 44 to 66 pounds of plutonium went missing from that plant. And we know that her death, while tragic, forced a legal reckoning that strengthened the ability of citizens to sue corporations for negligence.
It leaves you with a heavy thought. The cost of safety, the regulations we have today, the protections workers have, they often come at a very, very high price paid by people like Karen Silkwood.
It raises the question of what exactly was in that manila folder. If those documents had reached the New York Times that night, how much sooner would the changes have come? I will likely never know.
That's the enduring mystery, the folder that vanished into the Oklahoma night. It serves as a reminder that vigilance is often dangerous, but silence can be even more so.
Indeed.
Thanks for listening.